In this video, artist Christine Curtz-Casten demonstrates her pointillism painting techniques to the members of Northside Art Association. Christine first explored pointillism painting in 1988 after seeing contemporary Australian Aboriginal art at the Austral Gallery. She uses chopsticks and acrylic paint on a variety of surfaces, including canvas, birchboard, wooden object, cloth, glass, just about anything that doesn't run away. In addition to her pointillism work, she will offer a brief overview of other fun methods she's used to let off steam. Christine has enjoyed working with art materials since she was a child. In college, she drew logos for campus clubs and illustrated the anthropology department publications. Later, as a master gardener for the Missouri Botanical Gardens, she used her photographs for lectures and displays. Christine painted a bit in the late 80s, but art took a back seat to life for over 20 years. In January of 2013, Christine decided it was time to explore her creative side once again. It has been a thrilling 2 years for Christine. She volunteers at the Foundry Art Center in St. Charles, Missouri, and has entered shows locally and won many awards. And now, artist Christine Curtz-Casten.
As a child, I experimented with all kinds of art, and I used to outline things in black. I must have had some sort of connection with Max Beckmann when I was young, because I love bright colors surrounded with black lines. And I tried just about everything, entered a few shows when I was in high school, and I enjoyed art, and it had a place in my life through about college, but then you know how life takes sometimes precedent over your hobbies and your interests, and that's what happened to me. So after a flurry of a little Australian Aboriginal experiments in the late 80s, and you can see what inspired me down there, art just disappeared from my life. And then after my husband passed away in March of 2012, all of a sudden I thought, I can do art. I've never had any training in art, so everything just kind of comes out of my head. And that's why when I saw the Australian Aboriginal work, I said they never took an art class. And look at these powerful pieces of art that they're creating with sticks and acrylic, and then finally with canvas, not of the earth. They did have canvas eventually. So that's what I started with, kind of in this style, where it's a little more true to the earth colors. But I did this on the 1-year anniversary of my husband's death, and I used Australian symbols to illustrate his life, where he was born, what he did in his work, and it's called Frog's Final Battle, because his nickname was Frog, and he had Alzheimer's. So he has his spear, and he's fighting the Alzheimer's snake that's slowly taking his memory. But in the end, he triumphed. Because even though he passed away with his love intact. Maybe not his memory, but he passed away with the love intact. And that's where I just started taking off. I started with glass. This is a painting done on glass, like the tree there, of a sunset in Allens Park, Colorado. And we are going to do a demo, but I'm just kind of showing you, because the demo, you'll say, well, how did this come out of that, what she's doing? And some of my experiments, and I'm going to show you some of the golden medium and Liquitex mediums I've experimented with, because I went to they have these free sessions at Art Mart, and they show you how to use some different products. And I didn't think I was interested. I thought all I need is my acrylic and a chopstick, and that's it. But then when I discovered string gel and pouring medium, it gave me ways to be more creative. And it has a lot of symbolism from the country of Vietnam, and it's at Dao Tien Vietnamese restaurant at Olive and McKnight. That was my first commission. And people come in, and they do think it's mosaic. Someone mentioned it looks like a little mosaic. And then the owner says, no, it's made with chopsticks. And then they really have to look at it.
How big is it in the restaurant?
Now, one thing I experimented with this, it's not really a dot painting, but I used some of my newfound friends, like pouring medium. I mix that with my acrylic paint, put some paint and just let it drip down, and then drip sideways, and that's how I got the seaweed. And then for the fish, which is about a 1/4 inch thick, I used some string gel. So I mix the string gel with the acrylic. It makes it thicker, has more surface tension. So I literally just squeezed it out of a tube, like an icing tube, like you decorate a cake, onto some plastic that I knew I could peel it off. So that way I could do a bunch of fish, pick the good one, and not ruin my background with a bad fish. That's one reason I did it. I said, man.
Background is great.
But it just gives it a lot of texture.
You peel that off and then you put it on
Yeah, I peeled it off the plastic and then put it on the prepared canvas.
surface.
And I had one good front and one good back and cut them in half. So one's coming in and one's leaving. And you can come up and look at all these close up. But I guess I will do a little demo, because when you come up here, you'll be able to do things. But I don't only do pointillism where I go insane, because even though my natural tendencies is to be kind of OCD, I do need some relief. So they had a paper cut show at the Foundry, and I did my very first paper cut, similar to a mola embroidery from the San Blas Islands off Panama. That's why it looks a little familiar. And it got in the show. And someone said, well, I don't know if I try a recipe the first time and bring it to a party. You know what that meant. And I said, too bad, so I kept doing it for all the other shows, too. This was an experiment with paint, kind of Jackson Pollock-ish. I put a little pour medium in it to thin it out, and I put plastic on the floor and just splashed around, and the director of the Foundry bought it. So I thought, well, it's gone to a good home.
Splash your wet.
Thing is, I go to Goodwill. I'll go to 5 Goodwills in a day, Red Racks, some other thrift stores, and I buy like an old newel post or some.
You buy what?
Newel post cap. You know, when you come down a step in an old house, there's the newel post at the base of the steps, and there's usually a round disc, kind of looks like a flying saucer. Well, that's what I thought too. And there's all sorts of glass things you find, votive lights. So I made robots and spaceships and fun stuff like that. So that's what this is made out of, an old teak snack tray that was badly scarred. Looked like they had put it in a dishwasher. And I sanded it down and painted it, and now it's going to go on the wall. So, yeah, that's the real one. Why am I holding up the picture? I could hold up the real thing. But you wouldn't believe the wonderful wood that you find at a Goodwill that just needs a good refinishing. And to show what it looked like before I even left the label on. But I am going to wire it for hanging, because I don't really want to seal it and have it become a snack dish, because then it'll end up in somebody's dishwasher again and we'll start the cycle all over. Sometimes I do these small pieces while I'm working at the Foundry, because then people come up and want to ask questions. This one is plain. This one has a little of that pour medium on it to make it smoother, and I'm going to do either a butterfly, a bumblebee, some kind of critter on another layer like I did the fish, and I'm going to put it on here, and that'll give it dimension that'll look like it's actually sitting on the flowers. And yeah, this one was done with a mirror behind the glass, and you can come up and see these closer, but that's kind of fun.
Looks like Las Vegas.
Yeah, Las Vegas. That's the neon. I should call it neon time. Now what I do is I always use a chopstick. Now I didn't bring my sacred chopstick that's from Japan, and I've used it in all my paintings ever since I started, because what if I lost it when I was at this meeting? I probably wouldn't be able to paint anymore. So I'll use one of the normal ones, and you're all welcome to take home a canvas or two, a set of chopsticks, so you can go home and experiment in the privacy of your own home. Also, if you go out with it wet, you probably get it on your clothes. So I've prepared a few little cups. These little snack cups that come with lids are really cool, especially if you're doing demonstrations for a lot of people. And you can put the lid on, and the paint will save a few days. If the paint gets too thick, because I really want my dots perfectly round, I don't want them pear-shaped or star-shaped. If it starts getting a little sticky and it's misbehaving, I put a little acrylic glazing liquid in there, satin, and that gives it a little longer life. It doesn't bind up, because you know how acrylic, especially the heavy body acrylics, will start to bind up fairly quickly, especially if you're not using a brush, you're using a chopstick. So let's take one of these lurid colors I had left over from another demonstration with children. You know, children these days love magentas, violets, purples, pinks. They like neon green, like a lime green, a bright orange. They're just drawn to those colors. And if I have a whole spectrum of colors out, those tweens especially, like 8 to 14-year-olds, they'll just come in and these are the colors they go for. And I think, anthropologically speaking, it's because the Barbies and the different toys for their generation have always been packaged in brilliant magentas, purples, and blacks. And they love that. So you just dip the, I better do it with my glasses or I'll do it on my own buttons or something. Now see this one, I would think it's a little thick. I like a little tip on it, but this has a regular long, elongated Hershey's tip. Hershey's Kiss tip, I guess I want to say.
Yeah.
And you want it kind of gently pointed so you can do any size. People say, how many different size chopsticks do you use? And I say one. And they say, well, how do you go everywhere from the tiny to the, and I usually hold it straight up and down. But this tip is so bizarre. But I will show you how I do different sizes. Of course, this isn't my magical chopstick, so it kind of is imperfect. There's different size dots, all made with the same chopstick. So it's really how deep you press. See, by now there's no tip left. So if I do it now, it'll just be its regular size. But if you start out with that Hershey's Kiss,
You see what she's saying?
Oh, you want the Hershey's.
you want the Hershey's Kiss. You just don't want it vining
That's your
around like
tiniest-
that one.
That's your tiniest dot.
Yeah, your tiniest dot. And then the more you press on it, of course now, you really should dip between every single dot. But say this is all flat. But I want you to be able to see a little bit what I'm doing. Yeah, there's a full-size one.
And you want them to be raised.
Yeah. That's why I don't thin it out too much. If I use a little of that glaze, I'm just trying to extend its life, not making it completely flat. Because if it doesn't have any surface tension at all, it loses a little of its magic. Like if you run your hand over it, I almost want it like Braille, like you can read the painting. And I don't care if people touch it, it's acrylic. But the other thing that if you want some thickness, like for that fish, that's when I stir the string gel. I'm going to go ahead and do that so you can see how cool it is, how it changes the acrylics. Okay.
Was that what that was made for? Or was that another? Was it
Oh yeah, it's made for acrylic. I think it's when people maybe do more strewing. See, if you want to do a real Jackson Pollock, you wouldn't want to just put the pouring medium because it so liquefies it. It's just like kind of like water running over your canvas. But if you add some string gel, it'll take the heavy body acrylic and make it almost more like that automotive paint that he would use. Not I'm copying at Jackson Pollock, but if you do like the texture, you want to, I didn't know I brought a new one, fresh one. See, it's thicker. Oh well, we'll have a nice big one here. I said I didn't bring any paper towel, so I'll fix it when I get home. I'll probably get it all over my shirt. That's why I didn't dress better. Most of my clothes are completely, oh, I even did this on clothing before I found the fabric supplement that you mix to it. So, but it lasted like 6 months, multiple washings before it started looking a little. Now we're going to put some paint in. Oh, let's go with the purple.
So bully.
Yeah.
What brand really paints string gel?
Yeah, you can add, I don't think you can add it to oils or watercolors. It's definitely made for acrylic.
You don't need a whole lot of paint with it.
Well, no, it doesn't dilute it too much as far as the color. So, but you don't have to put a whole lot in. I just put,
But proportion-wise, that you need to know what.
proportion-wise, you can do it how, if you think it doesn't have its full opacity, then I would add a little more. But you could probably go 1 to 10. I mean, look, I'm not done stirring it yet. Now, this is going to be really cool. Too bad I don't have it on something plastic or, then I could peel it off later and use it for something. But see how thick that is? I mean, it's not even moving now.
So the 1 to 10 goes which way? The acrylic is 1 and
The acrylic paint is 1, and the gel is probably 10 if you're making a big quantity like this. But it's all experimental, and you know how that is with all of your work. Every time you do something, you change it a little bit, or you learn from one time. That's what I learned with that Femmage. I had never sewn before.
I don't care about this. Will that work?
Oh,
Plastic?
could be. Then you can take it home and do something with it. That's what I learned with the Femmage. Since I had never sewn, my first few photo leaves I did just looked ridiculous, like kindergarten students did it. But then by the time I did like 60 leaves or whatever it was, it really started looking better. So if you wanted to make a fish or a creature or a bee or just a shape, because this one has a lot of just the shapes on it, you would put this on here, and you could use a Ziploc bag or something to actually pipe it better. I'm just kind of smearing it around. But you can make pretty nice shapes even with your chopstick. I didn't even know I was going to do something this while. There we go. But you have to let it dry longer than you expect, because if it's not dry and you peel it, it'll just come apart. So this might have to sit 3 days, because that's fairly thick. And you can kind of tell from the back when you look at it if it's drying in that what process. You have to be very patient if you do some of these layered things, because if you come in with your pointillism, when your base, say this was a base that I added other pieces to, then put pouring medium over the whole thing to smooth it out a little bit, so when I did the pointillism, it didn't get caught like in the edge of a cloud. It gave it a smoother surface. You have to let everything dry, and the pour medium, you can tell if it's clear, that's when it's dry. If it's still slightly milky or opaque, you know it's not done drying yet, and be patient. Because to layer this up, this would probably take longer than you'd expect, because each layer has to dry. And if I'm coming in with another color of pointillism next to a very different color, I make sure the first color is dry, because if you get two pointillisms a little too close, it almost acts like an amoeba separating in reverse. The two separate halves touch and they go, you know, and bind themselves together in an unpleasant fashion.
So how exactly would you use that?
Okay,
Let's
see
say
that
it's
blob?
dry.
Let's
Yeah.
pretend that blob dries.
But it's all bumpy. You use the
Oh yeah, I like the bumpies. That's why I use string gel, to give it some texture. But this size was just like 4 or 5 colors. I could do that in 3 hours. But some of my pieces, like the one for the restaurant that was 5 by 3, that took several months. Because you can't do it 24 hours a day. You kind of go blind. But
So you had to let each color dry before you go to the next, or just only if they're right next to each other?
if they're right next to each other, or if you're worried you're going to touch it. You know, like with the green leaves that come around from behind here, I did the back first, and then kind of propped it up, but I waited to start with the lighter colors until I knew the green was dry. Otherwise, now somebody said, how often do you smear your own paintings? Because, you know, your arm does this, your sleeve does that. And I don't paint in the nude, but it would be a good idea. Because then you wouldn't have any clothing touching your mind. Oh, somebody said, do you ever draw first? No, normally I don't do any drawing at all first, because you can never really follow it, then you get frustrated. But for this one, I made paper cutouts of the outlines of the major elements. And then I dotted around that outline, then took the paper away. When it was dry, never try to take a paper form away while it's still wet, because inevitably it'll, you know, it's a mess. So at least I had the outline of the frog, the lotus, the monies, the bamboo, and then each day I could say, oh, I'm going to work on the bamboo today. And it helped me get it done, because I had to get it done by the 2nd anniversary of this restaurant. So there was no taking extra time. I had to have it done. And I just painted over where I smeared, redotted it, and then put my initial or my name in those dots and made it as if it was the signature corner to, you know, kind of hide my mess.
If you draw it out, so you're following it. Well, like, how do you know what colors to put on the frog then? Because
Because they're not always in color on them.
Oh, no.
For the first outline, I mean.
Well, I just do the dark outline, and then,
The black dots.
yeah, and then I wanted to make it symmetrical enough. Since I had made that other frog, I knew that I had to use an outline in order to assure that it would be symmetrical. I didn't want one leg to have a different number of colors. I wanted them to match. But since the dots are very consistent in their width, once you start, if you start with the same outline, you will end up in the same place because you're repeating like a quarter inch or something. But the reason I don't like to draw it out, these were like cut out of paper and I could move them around to determine where they went. But I didn't want to limit myself in detail. Because since all these things usually just come out of my head, the only thing I did with this one is I outlined my hand and put that outline. The rest of it just comes as it comes. Because I find if I do try to sketch anything out,
This was not sketched out?
no, I had a photograph of myself. No important parts showing because I was putting it up at the foundry. Since I worked at the foundry, I didn't want them to look at me at the front desk and go, well, I know who that is. So I took a photograph and I had these paintings on the wall.
Nice hair.
So I actually looked at the paintings and made my versions of those paintings. But I couldn't really draw it out because they're not exact. Even my body isn't. It is pretty much exact. But
You didn't draw that body, that figure at all?
No, I took a photograph, blew it up to, this is a 3 by 3 foot painting. So this is a life-size person. And by doing the outlines and doing a certain number of lines, that's what brings you into all the detail. As long as you start with a known outline, I don't need to sketch inside the outline, just because of the regularity of the dots. I know it doesn't make too much sense, but it actually works. Because there's, like this was a blind, a white wall, and the paintings, the covers, and me. So the only part that I did cut out was my outline.
Where did you start at on that picture?
On this one, I started with the blinds because they were the least detailed. I was least afraid of the blinds. I was probably most afraid of me. So I did all the background first and then filled in the person. Like the mountains, I have a picture of those mountains because I was there. But this is a conglomerate of a view of the mountains, a view of the trees I liked, a view of the sky. So I never copy anything exactly. It's like the inspiration for the image. Like this one was a tree. I actually didn't even go from a photograph for this one because it would have been too frustrating. The tree is so magnificent. I'm looking inside a Japanese maple at Winter Tour Museum and Gardens in Wilmington because it's growing on a hillside. There's no foliage to the back. So if you walk to the back of the tree, it's all open from the back. And you can see the branches and the leaves. And it looks like a brain. I always think it looks, when I saw it in person, it kind of looked like a glowing brain. But that's not
In person?
in person, when you look at that tree, it looks like you're standing inside a huge brain because of the branches. They look like the veins and the rivulets and all that kind of stuff. But I think what would be cool is I've done it at the Foundry on second Thursdays. I've done it for Make Art for Free. And I've done some children's demonstrations. And what I like about it is no kid walks up and says, I can't draw. No adult will walk up and say, oh, I can't do that, because they look at the dots and it's accessible to them. And of course, sometimes a few of them will say, oh, it's not as easy as I thought. But then I've had a few come up to me, like at benefit demonstration, like for the library system, and it's usually a man. And I've had a couple men walk up who've never painted in any way, and they start doing this pointillism with the different size. They figure out how to do this different size dots, and they get a rhythm going. One man made a little seahorse, another one made a dragon, and I'm looking at him going, wow, that's like as good as I can do after 2 years of fooling with it. Mm-hmm. So it is something that everyone can enjoy, and some people with no art training can really excel at it. Because that's why I like doing it when I'm working the desk at the Foundry, is some people are getting dragged there by their teeth or whatever you'd say. Like there's teenagers or kids or even some adults. And they'll see me doing this, and it's an instant connection because it's not too daunting. It's not too intimidating. It's like, oh, she's got a chopstick and some paint, and she just goes dot, dot, dot. And I think that's why I like it so much, is I'm not a great artist. I'm an accessible artist that makes other people want to paint too. Because I've seen like the work you all do, and I've seen all the shows, and I thought, wow, I could never do that, but I can do this. And it gives me so much pleasure, and especially since I'm looking forward to doing mostly sculpture in 2015. I'm going to do recycled, my good old Goodwill pieces, my architectural salvage. I go to architectural salvage yards and thrift shops, and I'm finding such wonderful pieces of wood. And I'm going to make some small tabletop totems where each keep bowl or monkey pod bowl has a different forest spirit, and I'm going to write that out for the people. And maybe they'll say, oh, I need some courage, or I need the love of family. So that's one angle. I'm currently getting ready to do a chess set, a working chess set made with all mismatched finials and knobs. So the king and the queen are like this big, so the chess board will have to accommodate those large. And then the pawns are all different, and it'll be marked so you know the black team and the white team, and the rooks from the, bishops and all that sort of thing.
Checkmate.
Checkmate, and it'll be fun to actually handle these materials that have been in people's homes, they've been in churches, or been in a farmhouse, and they're all together playing chess. So that's my next idea. But that's what I want to do with it is inspire people to do their own, as well as bring a smile to their face. There's something coming up at the Foundry, first weekend in December, I believe. I should have looked that up. It's called the Red Box, and every year they have it. And it's sort of to prepare for the holidays, and that it's art, but it's art priced to buy. I had pieces last year from $1 to $360. So someone could get a magnet or a birdhouse ornament or something. I'm not doing it this year, but that's one reason I'm going into sculpture. I think that would be such a fun booth next year, is to have people, looking at the rockets and the robots and all that good stuff. But it's also fun, like for charity events, when they had the mayor's ball, St. Charles, St. Peter's, O'Fallon, all the different mayors had a charity ball, and their theme was over the sea or to the sea.
Looks like a piano.
Well, it's a chair, but it's supposed to look like it's a sunset on the ocean with vines around it. And that was really fun to do, and I thought, wouldn't that be fun to do for kids? Like if you have children, grandchildren, dolls, whatever. So I'm really looking to apply my pointillism to whatever doesn't run away first.
So your largest dot is always a chopstick?
Yeah, it's about a quarter inch, it looks like. That's about my biggest dot.
That's your biggest dot. Okay, you don't.
Now I have a friend who does something he calls amplified pointillism, where he almost uses little square sponges or pieces of wood. So his are about 1 inch square. So that's a whole different thing. But I guess I'm so used to this that's what allows me not to sketch it first, because I can look at it and think, okay, that'll go about 8 rows in before it reverses, and then I lay out my paints, because I will want a certain spectrum of paint. So if I think, oh, I've got 8 rows going this way, I'll stand all my tubes up, so I do them in a kind of descending order or back and forth.
Did you say how you got started?
Yeah, I went to a gallery of course I was an anthropology major in college, so I was exposed to a lot of Aboriginal and Native American art and South Seas art. But I went to the Austral Gallery that was in Lafayette Square, 1988, I think it was opened. Mary Brunstrom, I believe was her name. And I had never seen contemporary Australian Aboriginal art before. I'd only seen the old work. And then I was seeing it on canvas, and I was like, that is just so cool. I could do that. You know how you go to some shows and you're like, oh, I could do that, especially that throw paint. Most people will say, I could do that. And you don't realize how complicated it is once you get started. But that's how I did get started with that. I said, that is accessible to me. and gardening, really both, are the most healing thing you can do. You're never alone when you have art supplies in your house. You're never, I wouldn't say you're never lonely, but it is a fine companion, and it is so challenging. One thing I challenged myself to do when I first started painting was enter every show at the Foundry, whether I knew what it was or not, whether I knew how to do it or not. Because the point was not getting in, not being displayed. It was meeting a deadline, creating something, and following the rules, learning how to submit everything online. So to me, that was the challenge. To really, and that was a lot of work. I've done it up till this past month. I missed the sculpture show because I was still finishing the Femmage piece. But it's been so exciting, then you never know if you're going to get in or not.
You mentioned your gardening, you know. I've been an avid gardener all my life, and now I can't. But you're never lonely when you're gardening.
No, and you can even, if you can't do it in the big sense, do it in the small sense. I moved from 3 acres to a condo with a deck. Of course, I have so many pots on my deck this year, 55, it almost slid down onto the Katy Trail, killing all the cyclists and everything. But I mean, that's really, you know, I only use the plastic planter's pot, because if I used any ceramic, I'm sure the weight load would just take that thing right off the wall.
Wow.
And then once you can't do a deck, then you can bring it in to the small venue, just like the art. Those 5x3s and 3x3s are physically challenging because you can't rest your arm on the canvas, and I don't know if I'm quite as steady as I was 30 years ago or whatever, but I'm pretty steady. I thought if I ever lose my steady hand, I'll go to fling art or the kind where I just pour it and then correct it or something. But I don't know, I just do find it incredibly joyful. But keeping myself on that schedule for almost 2 years, that's been a thrill in itself, especially when you actually get into something. I've never won a prize at the Foundry, but I think I've been in 6 of their shows. And then I go to Framation and St. Peter's Cultural Arts Center, Oak Leaf Artist Guild, and I promise I'm not bragging. I'm going to say something that knocked me off my chair. And the very first shows I entered, I got a piece at the Foundry. I had some in St. Peter's and Oak Leaf Artist Guild. So I went to the Foundry show first, then I went over to St. Peter's, and I guess I got there after they had made the announcements, but they hadn't hung the ribbons, and I didn't know that. So I said, oh, I didn't win anything on any of my pieces, but that's okay, that's my first show. Gave myself a big pep talk. Then they came and hung the ribbon. I won Best of Show in both shows, and a blue and a red in photography. And they're handing me these checks and these ribbons, and I'm standing there with my mouth open. I thought, I must be, unconscious and dreaming. And my sister-in-law, who went to school in art, said, now, Christine, it doesn't happen that way every time. I said, I don't care if it ever happens again. It happened once. And it took me I was so astounded. So that gives you the little courage it takes when I enter a lot of shows, maybe I don't get in, and I'm like, that's okay. I'm doing it. I'm out there. I'm trying. And I had one Best of Show this year. It was actually for a photograph. So I do enter a lot of photographs in shows also. I don't do any major
So you're a
art.
photographer too.
Well, I was for years with slide film, but there was a kind of traumatic for me to go to digital, because I thought, will I be able to take pictures anymore? Because I was so used to the slide. And you didn't alter them. You had to take them perfectly the first time. And that was something to adjust to. The thing I like about it, I could take the pictures, go to the computer, put it in, print it out. And I've got them right away to look at. But I don't have Photoshop. I don't have any major photo altering program. And I get in trouble when I say this in groups. So why not? We're almost done. You can be mad and leave. I actually think that straight photography without major manipulation is almost a different sport than Photoshop majoring. And I'm not saying the Photoshopping is not an art, but it's a whole set of skills that are separate from the I got up early and caught the sunrise, I didn't color it in later. Or this is a real lion in the grass, not a lion from the zoo put on a picture of the veldt. So that was my issue when they were first going from the slides to the digital. I'm like, well, how do we know they really captured this and didn't create it later? Some people, I thought it was pretty wild when they took glycerin and actually made fake dew. So I'd say, my dew is real. I was up early and that's real dew. So that's kind of one of my prejudices. So whether you're in gardening, photography, or art, everybody has their prejudice. And I know sometimes my straight photography looks a little undersaturated or doesn't look as exciting when it's surrounded by the altered pictures. So I do enter photography shows, and I did have a best of show with a portrait of a peacock that I took where my daughter works in Richmond. His name was Stanley, and he was a mascot for the Maymont Foundation. And 2 months after I took his picture, he was eaten by a raccoon. I said, Hannah, Stanley wrote again. He got a blue in one show and a best of show in another, and he was accepted into the Foundry show. So Stanley had a second life, after that.
Wow.
But how about some questions? Because maybe I haven't covered some of the things you might want to know or might not want to know.
Would you mind telling us what has been your top award price-wise?
I guess the day I got the best of show from St. Peter's, who gives, what the prize money was?
What have you sold? Your top piece that you've sold?
I sold 2 paintings for $360 at the Foundry's Red Box last year. I was their top seller. I made a total of, I generated over $2,000. It was $2,400, and then the Foundry does take a quarter of your profit. But the nice thing is they handle all the money. I didn't have to use credit, be able to process credit cards. I have not sold as much as I've shown. I think I've won more prizes than I've actually shown as far as shows go. I sold a piece at Framation. It was an old cabinet door with glass, back painted. It sort of looked like a plaid curtain blowing behind and it was all back painted on the glass. And of course I sold privately some pieces like that hand and
Restaurant commission.
oh yeah, the restaurant commission. Of course I went small cash, big eats. I ate for free for a year. To me, and see, that was better than getting paid. Of course, then she was like my agent. Some Mexican restaurant wanted me to do something. She said, I paid $1,200 for that painting. Well, really, she paid $200, just fed me for a year. Maybe she kept track of how much I ate. I don't know. But so far, what I do so things don't get stale, I give everybody a chance to be shown twice. I don't enter more than twice. I don't shop them around forever. And at the end of the year, whatever has not sold, except for this one, this is an example of my early work, I actually give as Christmas presents to my family and friends. Because I'm not a famous artist who wants to leave 1,000 paintings behind for my daughter. I want them to go out into the world each year so I can start fresh. I do keep a few examples, but if somebody wanted to buy it, I'd certainly sell it. I just kind of...
So you work on just...
Oh. Oh, this is my white elephant for the Christmas card. Yeah. But I think it's really cool. Like by Christmas time, half the time you don't have any money. So after the red box, I gave away all my leftovers, all my ornaments. I had little bird houses, and instead of making them just look cutie, they were painted like that, but I put a glass disc in the hole where the bird would be, and I back painted it like an eye. And I had the eyes looking all different directions, so that like it was something in that birdhouse looking around. And so there's always a little edge to make it more fun. I'm really big on the transformative aspect. This was a wood carving I had done some years ago, and it was good to feel, but not that good to look at. So I painted the inner part as a snail, and then this is a calla lily, and when you look at it at the back, you have both the spiral of the snail and the colors of the calla lily, the purple calla lily come to the back. And I think those ideas are kind of cool.
Focused in North St. Louis County, Northside Art Association is a nonprofit 501c3 arts organization that serves local artists through community exposure, networking, education, and peer interaction. Learn more about Northside Art Association at www.northsideartassociation.org.